Welcome to Saturday night live stream. This has been a pretty exciting week for not just Tesla, but for all electric cars. So I had such a great time talking about it with you guys and reporting on this. Of course, this stream once again is sponsored by EVNX, the aftermarket accessory for Tesla. So I am excited to have them, but I'm especially excited that today I don't just get to talk by myself. Today I have a very special guest. Patrick Lawson, I have done a collab with him a couple of months back, which was fun, and he has his own channel called Tesla Trip. If you guys haven't seen his channel, there's a link down here in the description of this video, so definitely check it out. And he's going to be helping me out today to just have this conversation. I wanted to know what his opinion is on pretty much everything that's been happening. Also, me and him are going to be going to the truck unveiling event in just a couple of weeks, so I know we're both looking forward to it. So without further ado, Patrick, welcome to the show. You are now live. How are you, my friend?
Good. How you doing, Alex?
Good. So, well, I'm glad to have you here because I've been talking about all these awesome things that have been happening. Well, and not such some really good things and such. And some concerning things that have been happening to Tesla. So I wanted to kind of, get your opinion about what's going on with Tesla this week. Talk about the Q3 results. Talk about the truck unveiling. What are your thoughts about the? Let's start with the quarterly report.
Well, there's a lot of news. That's for sure. Not a lot of good news. I don't know. It's a little bit troubling, I suppose, that they're falling behind on the Model 3 production, and still on the autopilot front, not a whole lot of news. It sounds like there's some advancements coming out soon, but they didn't say exactly when. It's always been a few months out for every time they say something, so it's like in an indefinite amount of time.
Well, you know what I think is concerning, or at least should be concerning for them, is that most of the news about autopilot are coming out of other companies' feeds, right? Either it's Nissan Leaf or some other company that's coming up, or Chevy Bolt has been doing this cruise project where they've been really, really catching up to Tesla. So I think the news that are coming out are not good news for Tesla because they're kind of on a standstill.
Yeah, I'm hoping they've got something back there that they're beta testing, that they're just not ready to push out to the public, and that they're going to eventually push it out. Because when Autopilot 1 was out, I had a Model S and with Autopilot capability before it was released for a whole year. And when they finally kicked it on, man, it was a huge difference between where it was just barely just doing the automatic cruise control braking versus the auto steer. When they kicked on that auto steer, I'm hoping it's going to be something like that, that the next big thing is going to be something pretty major, and they're just kind of holding back on it until they get it just right.
Well, I mean, let's hope so. And I think the biggest thing with what's been happening with the quarterly report is also the delays with the Model 3. What are your thoughts on that?
So I was at the unveiling event for the Model 3, was it like a year and a half ago or so? And at the time, Elon, it really sounded like he was like, well, this is 2 years out, and we'll have some vehicles delivered by the end of 2017. So he said, if all the stars align and all the suppliers get everything in place, we're giving them a deadline of July 1st, 2017, and we'll kick a few of them out before the end of the year, and then we'll start doing mass production in 2018. So
Yep.
when they delivered the 30 of them at the end of July, I was like, wow, they're doing way better than expected. And then he started putting out all these numbers about how many they were going to make this year, and it seemed like it was unobtainable. Like, that's crazy. How are they ever going to do that? So now that they're backscaling it again, it's like, well, that makes a little bit more sense in line with the original plan. So it's disappointing that they're kind of over-promising and under-delivering, because for a brief moment, they were over delivering on what they were promising.
Exactly. Well, so there are kind of two groups of people that like have an opinion on this, right? One group that thinks that hey, it's always good to overpromise just because the hype is bigger, and the fact that they have a delay. Well, people have kind of gotten used to it, so it's kind of like that's not a big deal that they're gonna have a delay. And there's another camp, and I'm in that second camp, is that under promise and over deliver, which is, by the way, the usually it's just the one of the main concepts of customer service and customer satisfaction. So I'd rather have him do what he did in the beginning of the year, right? Because Elon said, hey, we're not going to start production until December of this year, and boom, all of a sudden in July they're ready to go. They already have 30 of them, so everybody got excited. So that was good. But now that he promised 5,000 a week, and it's not going to happen, I think that's what's hurting him now and Tesla stock.
Yeah, it's disappointing they weren't able to keep up with that. On my reservation, it said that I could still potentially have a delivery in October all the way until November 1st, and then they finally obviously moved it to November to January instead of October to December.
I mean, on the other hand, of course, they're pushing it just one. This whole hoopla is all about really just 1 month, right? Right? Everyone's reservations are only pushed 1 month, which is in a grander scheme of things is not that big of a deal, but nevertheless, it just looks bad. Which kind of brings me to the next question. So we're going to the semi truck, or as they're calling it now, truck, Tesla truck event.
That's gonna be very cool.
You're excited about that?
I'm excited about it. I'm really excited about if it was an Apple event, the one more thing that Elon's kind of been dropping is that
right.
Is that going to be? It's going to be one of two things. I think it's going to be a range of electric trucks. So they're going to talk about the whole platform, where it's going to be the semi, pickup truck, and their service vehicles. They already mentioned they're going to be doing service vehicles for themselves based on the Model X platform.
Right.
So they're probably going to announce all those things. And the other thing that I think they're going to do is the autopilot update. They're going to show that this thing's going to be autopilot capable. And, eventually when it's regulatory approved or whatever, they won't need a driver and it'll be able to deliver stuff on its own. So I think they're probably holding off on any major autopilot advancements until that event, and they're probably going to show something off new that they haven't shown before, or at least that's what I'm hoping for.
Evie Patty in the chat says, but Apple wouldn't mention the one more thing a month before the event. I think he has a good point because I think it's a good point because it's now everyone's overhyping it, right? Everybody thinking maybe there will be a Tesla truck, maybe it's Model Y, and most likely it's not going to be. It's going to be something that's a little bit less than that. So now they're going to under deliver rather than over deliver if they never mention it. So I think Evie Patty has a point there. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's kind of like with the Model 3. Everybody thought, oh man, it's going to have that spaceship steering wheel and it's going to have a heads-up display. People were just speculating out of control. And then when they finally did the delivery event, they're like, oh yeah, it's a smaller Model S, and we're making them now. But they went into almost no details.
Yeah. So I agree. This he probably shouldn't have never mentioned that. But let me ask you more of like a serious question, because I've always been a little bit not so much behind this idea of doing a semi-truck, at least at this point. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's good that they're going into another industry. They're going to disrupt, and it's all good, and it's an important industry to be in. But at the same time, they are spread so thin right now. And now with the Puerto Rico thing and a semi-truck event, which has been pushed back twice now, do you think it would have been a better idea if they would have kind of thrown all of the resources into Model 3? And I know people who work on a truck are a little bit different, but I'm just saying they probably have so much talent that they can throw around. Do you think that would have been better?
I don't know how much resources are duplicated like that, because the Hawthorne Design Center, they're designing this stuff. That's what they do. If the Model 3's already been designed, how much more would they be able to speed up the actual production of it if they weren't working on the semi. I think it's negligible. It's not. I don't think it's going to make that big of a difference. If anything, it's going to take up Elon's time, and
And it
he's
is. It
spreading
looks like
himself
he's
really.
sleeping there.
Yeah, well, he's sleeping at the Gigafactory right now, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I mean, good for
and
him. I mean, that's great,
uh,
right? But maybe we would have not been there if there was appropriate resources. But I hear what you're saying, that maybe they don't always overlap. And just
yeah,
because the semi truck was, someone's working on it, it doesn't really take it away from the Model 3 development. So you might have a point there.
yeah. I mean, it could be taking away from like the Model Y development, maybe, or I don't know. Maybe they're all kind of related or something. It's maybe
Uh,
it's
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've been kind of skeptical, but let's see what happens. David Hall in the chat says, I worked with the trucks for BP, and BP sold all the trucks because of the fueling cost of delivery. Um, Obviously, this is going to disrupt that industry in many different levels, but especially because the trucks are using so much fuel, and now they are just going to use electricity. On another hand, I wonder where they're going to supercharge and charge their trucks, which is going to be cheaper, but nevertheless, this is going to require either the current infrastructure or maybe something specific where those trucking companies would have to have their own superchargers on site to charge those trucks.
I think so. There's no way that these semis are going to be using the superchargers. They're going to pull in and take up all the stations, and then to charge that big of a battery, what are they going to do? Hook them all into the semi? They're going to have to. Maybe that's another part of the big announcement. Maybe they're going to say, "Oh, we partner with Flying J or one of the really big truck stop stations, and we're putting them all across the country." Or I don't know. From the rumors of the range, I don't think it's going to be a cross country semi yet. They're going to start out with, well, this is the one for local deliveries for the in town or, the county area. They're not really going to be the long haul across America yet. That's going to be the next version. That that's what I'm
What do you
thinking.
think? What do you think the range is going to be? Or what do you think the range is going to be where it's not going to disappoint most of the people?
I think they need to have over 300 miles to make people like excited, but I think they're probably going to be saying closer to 200 with a heavy load, and without a heavy load they could quote some ridiculous number like 500 miles.
Yeah, and I think you're right. The load really does matter, right? Because if you're hauling gold versus if you're hauling an empty truck, that's going to make a humongous difference. So I wonder how they're going to estimate the actual range, you know?
Now I can tell you from hauling my boat around on my Model X, what makes more difference than the weight is the aerodynamics of it. So my boat had a windshield on it, and when it was open, the air drag, I could feel it in the X towing it. That you could feel that extra drag on there, and I'd close the window up so it was more aerodynamic, and
Yeah.
it felt like I wasn't pulling anything at all, and you could see it in the range. So if you look at the imitation that we got, you can see that that thing is like super aerodynamic and super tall to go over the load and around the load. And I think that's another thing they're going to talk about. Like when they were at the Gigafactory saying, well, we're going to redesign the whole manufacturing process. We're going to redefine the machine that makes the machine. I think they're going to try and do the same thing with the trucking industry. They're going to rethink the whole idea of how they actually do the cargo too, not just just making an electric conversion of an existing semi.
And Elon said that they were actually consulting, the leaders of the trucking industry a while back, almost as maybe far back as 1 year ago, to help them to come up with a good design and understand what's more important for them. So I'm hoping they're gonna follow their advice and understand what's necessary. So I kind of trust Tesla to get that part right. What do you think?
I think so. I think they're the way that they go about doing things is they kind of have to do things different. They got to make a change. They're trying to disrupt the whole industry that they're entering. So I'm excited to see what that is or how they're thinking they're going to be able to do that.
David in the chat says the load is government controlled, so Tesla has specs to run on the road, so it can't just pull any amount of load, which is fair enough. But still, the difference in load and as you just say, aerodynamic is going to make it kind of really hard to say what the range of this truck is, like it was with the regular cars, Model S, X, and 3.
Yeah, I think there's going to be something major different. Like instead of doing double or triple trailers which is legal in some states, they're going to have maybe platooning. So they're going to be multiple loads that drive themselves behind the semi that's controlling them. So they'll be kind of like in the interim before it's 100% autonomous. There'll be a single operator controlling it could be like basically a train of semis behind it.
Fair enough. Jay Smart asks, will Tesla be able to reach 10,000 superchargers by the end of 2017? What do you think? This is this year.
No, I don't think so.
As always, they're overpromise and underdeliver, right? But they have made good progress. But I think well, think about this. What's helping is the fact that the Model 3 is running late, right? So they won't have as many of Model 3s on the road as soon as they've predicted. So they will hopefully make bigger progress with superchargers while Model 3 is still not being put out there on the road in such higher numbers. So this delay might actually benefit the supercharging advance, right?
Maybe. I can see from personally, I'm putting in my little mini charging network in Wyoming, and it's really hard to get these agreements with property owners to place charging stations in the areas that they're trying to right now. So those are the places with the huge oil fields like North Dakota and Wyoming and Montana, and they don't want electric vehicle chargers. So the way that Tesla does it now, it's not necessarily an issue of them having the resources to put them in. It's the issue of just getting a place that wants them.
That's true, and I already made a video about this, and I think we've talked. I had a question in the chat a couple of days ago where people who are buying Model 3 are going to be buying Model 3. They don't live in their own houses a lot of times. They are renters, or they live in condos and that are being part of the HOAs. And those, and I know this from my own experience, they don't have the chargers, but they don't even allow you to install it. And going to your point is that, why do you think that is? And why, do you think that's just laziness? Do you think that's they don't understand what's happening? What is your experience with that?
I don't think it's laziness. It's just they just don't get it, and they think that it's just going to be an extra expense and an extra hassle, and they simply don't want to deal with it. That's and in my area, they think it's a threat to their industry, so they really don't want it.
Wow. Yeah, I don't get why apartment complexes don't want to do this, because like I've lived here for 5 years in my complex, and it's mainly because I wanted to move last year. I wanted to move last time I had to renew my lease, and I couldn't because no one else offers this. So therefore, this apartment complex gets to have me as a customer overpaying my rent because they had a charger installed for what, $3,000, So I don't really understand what are they afraid of. They're really actually putting themselves in ahead of everyone and keeping renters in place.
Yeah, over in California, it sounds like you guys have some good laws that are coming up, or they're going to require that you put in a certain amount of chargers for X amount of people in a housing development. So any new structures, they're going to have to allocate a certain portion of them for EV charging, which is great news.
Yeah, I hope our laws are going to evolve into that, and they're also working on higher rebate for electric car owners. But I know that for a fact got sort of stuck in one of the committees, and it never made it to the floor of our local Senate for the discussion. So hopefully they'll reconsider it in January. But you're right. Some of California laws are obviously more friendly to electric cars, which brings me to another topic I want to talk to you about, which is, this week, as we we found out what GOP's proposed tax bill is going to be. It looks like if it was to pass today, we are going to have no federal credit for electric cars for anybody, including Tesla, whatever other cars. Let's say this is true. Let's say they're actually going to pass it before Christmas. Trump signs it. What do you think is going to do for the electric car industry in general and Tesla specifically?
Well, it's definitely not a good thing. I think that's a huge incentive right now for people to hop on board, is that tax credit. Although I don't think it's going to be like the end of electric vehicles or anything like that, because Tesla's already getting close to reaching their graduation, and they're smart about it. They've been marketing the Model 3 as a $35,000 car. They aren't doing what GM's doing, like saying it's under $30,000 after tax credits. They're so that's cool. And then also GM and Nissan, they're getting up there too. So the only people that it's really going to hurt are all these other manufacturers that are up and coming, or the ones that really haven't got on board with it yet. I see that they're going to have a lot harder time catching up with Tesla and GM.
Well, so I was talking about a Nissan Leaf because I did a test drive yesterday in the new Nissan Leaf, and even though I think they still have quite a long way to go, like about 80,000 cars, and it's going to hurt them the most because, you know, when you're buying a Model S, let's say for 80, 90, 100,000, you don't really feel, you know, $7,500, it's a lot of money unless it's compared to $75,000, right? It's, you know, it's 10%. It matters, but it's not going to persuade too many people to not buy a Model S or a Model X. With a Nissan Leaf and even Chevy Bolt, and maybe even with a Model 3, that might actually change people's minds in terms of not adopting this just yet, because a lot of people are going for electric cars just because they're so cheap after all the incentives. So I think that might actually hurt cars like Nissan Leaf and Chevy Bolt.
Yeah, I know when I got my Chevy Volt with a V, I actually didn't make enough money or have a big enough tax liability to get the full credit. So I think as EVs become cheaper, that the way that the tax credit is currently set up, a lot of people probably might not be able to take advantage of the tax credit. So I don't know, maybe there's a better way of doing it. And it was going to expire in the not too distant future for a lot of people anyways. So hopefully it can come back if they do end up killing it as something better. I'd hope, or hopefully that they don't kill it at all. That'd be the best thing.
Well, I hope California will step up. If that happens, California might step up, and some other states, and just up the actual rebate on their own and help everybody out. Probably not to 10,000, but maybe to 5,000. And obviously, let's hope that, you know, Trump and GOP will continue fighting and they're just never able to do this. But it's definitely going to be a problem. Let's see. Lucas Mock says, still Tesla does more than all industry around the world, and not to promise like Porsche around 15 minutes for full charge without infrastructure on the market. What do you think about that?
Real quick, back to Colorado, what they do with their tax credit for the state is they're allowing the dealership to take off $5,000 and they take the tax credit. So I think that would be super awesome if other states started doing that.
Yeah, you know, you get that deal when you, I'm sorry, I'll interrupt for a second, because you get that deal also when you lease your car. That credit, federal credit, gets built in.
Yeah, that's true. So the charging infrastructure, the supercharger, yeah, I mean, Tesla's
no, I think he's talking
far ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, I think he was talking about Porsche, and you know, what he's saying, and you know, correct me if I'm wrong here in the chat, but I guess what he's saying is that, you know, who cares if you can charge your battery technically in 15 minutes if you have nowhere to charge it at, you know?
Yeah, that's very good point.
Though I have to say that yesterday when I was test driving the Nissan Leaf, I found something new out, is that you can actually do level 3 charging for the new Nissan Leaf, and then EVgo network actually has a lot of level 3 charging. So that's
Yeah,
kind of
it's
catching up.
so the level 3 charging on the Chatamos currently for the, I guess, the last generation of the Leaf, it capped out at 50 kilowatts. And Tesla does 130, is it?
Yeah, even more than that,
So
I think.
yeah. Yeah, so it's a pretty significant difference. You're looking at like 2 to 3 times faster for the Tesla charging than it is on the Leaf. And even though they're making the battery bigger, all this existing infrastructure with all those CHAdeMOs, a lot of them are only 25 kilowatts, and there's some that are 50, but yeah, they it's significantly slower, and they need to up it. The new spec, I believe, can go significantly higher, but there are no stations out in America right now that can do it. I know there's a few that do 100 over in Europe, I believe. Um, but yeah, no, it's
Well, I
so
was
far
just
behind.
surprised. I literally didn't. Yeah, I didn't even know that was a thing. And but the guy told me that the guy who was doing the test drives, because that's his job, driving around in a new Nissan Leaf and give rides to potential customers. And he just said, hey, that's what I do. I take about 30 minutes to charge about 80%, which for that car means about 120 miles. And he says he does it all the time, and it's been pretty convenient. So I have a feeling, and this is what my kind of next question to you was, do you feel like the other companies are starting to finally compete with Tesla? Maybe not overall, but in one particular thing. Like one company has a better range or similar range, another charging network is catching up to the speed and so forth. Do you feel like Tesla is no longer untouchable?
Um, I I don't think they were ever untouchable, but I think they're
Really?
definitely, top of the line. And it's there's going to be all the cheaper like the Bolt. The Bolt is the perfect example. I mean, it meets all the marks that everybody wanted in that in the Model 3 Tesla, except it's not a Tesla, and it doesn't
It's
have
true.
the charging infrastructure like at all. It uses the CCS charging network, which they've just barely started to be putting around and adding on in areas. At least the CHAdeMO network is pretty well built out in some areas for Nissan Leaf owners. I'm talking outside of California. California is actually doing pretty decent, but usually when they put these things in, they put one, maybe two stations. And Tesla's over here, they're talking about building stations that have 50 stalls. So even if they build their electric highway that goes between, 2 or 3 states, and they put one or two charging stations every 100 miles, like they're planning to do with the Volkswagen funding. And that's the other thing too. All the other manufacturers are waiting for somebody else to put in the network for people to charge, where Tesla went ahead and they put in the network.
Yeah.
It's
I,
yeah, so I it
You're sorry. You're exactly right. Because when I was interviewing Lucid Motors guys with their Lucid Air car a couple of months ago on at the I forgot the event. In Monterey, Monterey Car Week, and so they were specifically told me in the interview, wasn't even off camera, that that's their strategy. They are going to wait for the charging networks to kind of grow up and be able to support it. Which I have to say, that might just happen. I mean, because it is a good business, right? And as you know, Shell just bought the largest manufacturer of electric chargers in Europe. So they know they're going to compete. They're going to start building those networks. And I think, there will be 2-3 years where Tesla will definitely have the monopoly. But once the rest of the world will start catching up, they will be able to catch up relatively fast. EV Patty says, I think they still have a lead, meaning Tesla, but once the other companies get serious, they can catch up quickly if they want. I think he has a point.
Yeah, I think Tesla is going to be a more of a premium brand of vehicles. And I think as time goes on, there's going to be some very cheap electric vehicles. Because when you think about it, they're much simpler. And once they become mass market and the battery technology and mass production becomes cheaper, they're going to be able to kick things out, these vehicles out much cheaper than they do with current ICE vehicles. So I think there's room for everybody, and Tesla might not be the Ferrari, but they'll be more like the BMW of electric cars. I don't know. Maybe they'll start being more like the Ferrari. Who knows how much that new Roadster is going to cost?
I know. Well, I mean, the Leaf already starts under 30,000, so that's priced pretty competitively, and that's before any incentive. So if you would buy it like in January, you'll still, if the incentive is still there, that's going to be $20,000 car. Yeah, it's not going to be top of the line or have the e-pedal or whatever, but that's a pretty damn good price for a decent Nissan electric car,
Yeah. Yeah. They're going for that bottom market, or well, the smart electrics are going for the bottom market. I think those are already under 20,000.
Yeah.
But they're, a little two-seater thing, which
Ben,
has a place.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben Dixon says Model 3 can take 250 plus watts. Maybe they will release a 400 watt system at the truck unveil. What about that? Maybe they will reveal something cool or an upgrade to a supercharging network.
That's interesting. I think they might. They might do that, going up more in the voltage, so that they don't have to create bigger cabling systems, and so that's what I think the Mission E is doing with Porsche. They're going with a higher voltage for the charging, and that's how they're able to increase the charge rate to, I think, 350 kilowatt.
Yeah.
But the other interesting thing about like the Model 3 is because it's so much more efficient at the superchargers, the range per hour that you get is over 400 miles an hour. So it's a lot. It charges faster just because it's a more efficient vehicle.
Okay, well, so here's a quick question, and this is from my girlfriend who's actually out of town, but she's watching and she's asking actually a pretty good question. As electric cars grow in popularity, would it be a good idea to buy stock and battery material companies? Now, of course, first, let me tell you, she's going to get me in trouble right away, but we're not financial advisors. So this is not really an advice, this is very much an opinion, but I think this is how I invested into Tesla. I invested it at $99 per share because I thought that this is the future. And so, these companies who are now creating technology for the future obviously have a better chance of making it, So, I mean, I don't want to say yes, but, you're on the right track as far as the thinking process goes, So that's...
I have to agree. I mean, if you believe in something and you see it being the future, that's where you invest. And it makes sense to invest in, the materials, because everybody's going to be needing those materials.
Yeah, and LG and Toshiba are coming up with batteries that are going to be specifically for electric cars, and that might get a lot of regular companies that are behind, like Ford and Toyota, catch up to the competition really soon, because they can make electric motors. They just can't make batteries. So if someone else will sell them a battery that has a decent range, well, they're back in the game. So that's definitely a good point. Last question. So 5 years ago, Tesla was pretty much undisputed champion of electric cars. And even 3 years ago, and even a year ago, I would say. But in the last couple of months, 3 months, with the Frankfurt show, with the Tokyo show, as almost every manufacturer came out with a really big budget for electrifying their fleet, or announced prototypes or concepts, and a few countries came out and said, hey, we're going to start working on legislation to outlaw gas car sales overall in 2030, 2040, whatever. So the race is on. And I would always give the example of iPhone. iPhone was the best phone on the market. There was no competition, but then Android came around, and now little by little, they started to compete and took a big chunk of the market share. So my question to you is, who do you think that Android is going to be to Tesla and be sort of a relatively realistic competitor in the next year or two?
That's a really good question. I think it might be LG Chem. Like they're basically like the Google operating system, right? They're supplying almost everybody else with their battery technology and a lot of the underneath workings of the vehicle. So they're upping their production rate and everything. And I think that's what it's going to be. Is a lot of these other companies, they don't care so much, and they're going to just outsource it, or they're going to have other people like. Well, Tesla was doing that before for Toyota, right? They had the
Yeah.
RAV4 EV that was using the Tesla drivetrain and battery, and even Mercedes too. So I don't know. That's a really good question. I think a lot of these things are going to look very similar from other manufacturers, and I think Tesla will be kind of continue to do their own thing.
All right, fair enough. All right, man. Well, listen, thank you so much for being on the show, hanging out with me. I'm looking forward to hanging out with you in person again at the Unveil event. I'm looking forward to it. I'm making no guesses. I have no expectations. I'm going to have a good time and report on whatever happens in this crazy world of Tesla. So thank you so much for joining me. I will see you soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a blast. Have me back anytime. Thanks.
All right, guys. So that was Patrick Lawson. He has his own channel called Tesla Trip, and you should definitely check it out. He has a lot of cool videos in there, and we're going to be reporting from the event, just like we mentioned, in the next couple of weeks on the 16th. So, well, that's it from me for today. I'm going to do another show tomorrow, hopefully around noon, so we can just kind of hang out. I'm going to do the recap of the news for the week, and then we can just probably just kind of talk about electric cars for a little bit. I'll answer some of your questions or read some of your comments, so we'll have another good time tomorrow. But other than that, I've had a really good time. Thank you again to Patrick for being on my show, and I'm looking forward to seeing him. Check out his channel. The link to his channel is down at the bottom in the description of this video. Other than that, see you guys next time, and remember to stay charged.